Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling compostable plastics, and I know you're all just as eager as I am to hear about the latest research.
Definitely.
We'll be looking at a 2023 article from Knowable magazine called Get This, Toward Truly Compostable Plastic.
Love that title.
Me too, gets right to the point. And speaking of getting to the point, we've produced a lot of plastic globally.
We have over 8 billion metric tons. Just think about that for a second. 8 billion.
Wow. That's kind of hard to even fathom.
It is. It really is.
Before we get all doom and gloom about it,
Right.
I think it's important to remember why plastic became so ubiquitous to begin with. I mean, it's not all bad, right? It's done some good for the world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, plastic has revolutionized so many industries. I mean, look at food packaging and medical devices, even the insulation in our homes.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, so it's lightweight, durable, it's versatile, and it's often very cost-effective.
It is, and that's kind of the problem, right? Like, it's so useful and cheap that we just use way too much of it.
Exactly. So this deep dive isn't about, demonizing plastic.
Right.
It's more about acknowledging the problem of plastic waste and then seeing how we can make it better for the planet.
Right. Okay, so that brings us to this concept of bioplastics,
Right.
which the article dives right into. And they point out that simply being bio-based isn't really enough
It's not.
to solve the problem. So what's the catch there?
Well, it all comes down to what happens
Yeah.
at the end of a plastic's life. You know, a lot of products that are labeled as bioplastics are made from, plant-based materials. And
Okay.
which sounds great on the surface,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that they'll break down naturally in the environment.
Okay, so then what's the thing we should be looking for?
Well, the magic word here
Yeah.
is compostable,
Compostable. Okay.
which means that the material can completely break down into natural organic components, in a safe way that can be returned to the earth.
Okay, so it's not just about where it comes from. It's
No.
about where it goes
Exactly.
when it's done.
Exactly.
Right, okay. But even stuff that's labeled as compostable is ending up in landfills.
It is.
So doesn't that mean there's kind of a bigger problem here? Like, even if we have the right material, something's not working right.
Yeah, you're hitting on a key point there. The article uses PLA cutlery as a good example.
Okay.
So it's often marketed as compostable, but the thing is it needs very specific conditions to break down properly. Conditions that most home compost piles or even industrial composting facilities just can't provide.
Okay, so even with PLA, which
Right.
sounds great, like, oh, it's made from plants, it can compost.
Right.
Even that, we're still facing these challenges
Yeah.
to get it to actually break down the way it's supposed to, okay?
Right.
So to understand why this is so tricky, I think it's helpful to kind of take a step back and think about how conventional plastics are made in the
Okay.
first place. And that article calls it this two-step process.
It is a two-step process.
So let's break that down.
Yeah, it starts with petroleum.
Okay.
The first step is breaking down that petroleum into smaller molecules called monomers.
Monomers, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking apart, a Lego structure.
Okay.
And you get all the individual bricks, right?
Right.
Those bricks would be your monomers. So they're the basic building blocks of
Yeah.
plastic.
Got it. So I'm picturing these little Lego pieces. What happens next?
Well, step 2 is basically putting those monomers back together in a specific way to form polymers, which are those long chains that give the plastic its structure. And then to fine-tune the properties of the plastic, they can add other ingredients.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, the article mentions plasticizers.
Okay, plasticizers. What do those do?
Think about the difference between, like, a rigid water bottle
Yeah.
and a squishy plastic bag. That's the work of plasticizers. They make the plastic more flexible.
Okay. So it's all about finding the right balance, depending on what the plastic's going to be used for.
Exactly.
But this whole process, starting with petroleum, that seems kind of like a dead end if we're trying to solve the plastic waste problem.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, and not just because we're using a finite resource.
Right.
This process also consumes a massive amount of fossil fuels.
Yeah. That's not good.
No, it's not. So that's why researchers are really exploring these bio-based alternatives.
Okay.
The big question is, can we truly mimic nature's perfect plastic?
All right. I am hooked. I want to know more.
Right.
The article talks about this company called Braskem that created bio-PE from sugarcane.
Yeah.
So what's the big deal there?
Well, it's chemically identical to traditional polyethylene,
Okay.
which is one of those common plastics we use. And because sugarcane absorbs CO2 as it grows, it means the source material is much more sustainable.
Okay, that sounds promising.
It is.
So is this, like, problem solved?
Well, not so fast.
Oh, okay.
It turns out that this bio-PE, it doesn't actually biodegrade very easily.
Oh.
It's still essentially polyethylene,
Mm-hmm.
and nature hasn't quite figured out how to, break it down quickly.
Oh, so even if the source material is renewable, we're still kind of stuck with the same problem.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Ugh, that's so frustrating.
It is. And it highlights a key point, I think, which is we need to find materials that actually can break down naturally at the end of their life,
Right.
not just come from renewable sources.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where the hunt for better biosource monomers really comes in.
Right. And there are some interesting contenders out there.
There are.
Right.
Yeah. There's a team in California that's mentioned in the article
Okay.
that extracted this monomer called a polyol from algae.
Okay.
And then they use that to create this biodegradable foam that they're using in footwear.
Wait, biodegradable shoes?
Biodegradable shoes. That's the idea.
That decompose after you're done with them? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's what's possible with just biosourced monomers,
Right.
what about nature's ready-made polymers?
Exactly.
What can we do with those?
Well, that's the idea. Instead of trying to break things down and rebuild them,
Yeah.
why not just use what nature's already created?
Right.
So the article highlights a couple of examples. Cellulose and silk.
Okay.
Both of these have incredibly strong hierarchical structures.
Hierarchical structures. Break that down for me.
Okay, think about plywood.
Okay.
It's made of thin layers of wood that are glued together, but those layers all run in different directions.
Great.
And that's what gives plywood its strength. So cellulose and silk actually have a similar type of organization,
Oh, okay.
and that gives them this really impressive tensile strength.
Okay, so it sounds like strength isn't the issue here. So
Yeah.
what's different between these natural polymers and the synthetic polymers that we've been talking about?
It comes down to the types of bonds that hold them together. So natural polymers, they rely on a large number of kind of weak bonds, kind of like Velcro.
Oh, Velcro.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can stick together, but it
Right.
can also come apart.
Exactly. Whereas synthetic polymers tend to have fewer bonds,
Okay.
but they're much stronger bonds. So more like super glue.
Okay, super glue.
Mhm.
Yeah, get it.
It's a good analogy.
So with natural polymers, those weak bonds are actually designed to break down over time, which makes them perfect for compostability. Like
So-
nature truly has thought of everything.
Nature's amazing. And speaking of nature's brilliance,
Yeah.
the article also looks at this really cool concept called bottom-up design for bioplastics.
What is that?
Well, imagine using entire cells or biological materials
Wow.
to create plastic rather than, isolating specific polymers.
Hold on. So, like, making plastic from whole cells? That sounds like science fiction.
I know, it's pretty wild,
Okay.
but it's actually happening.
Really?
The article talks about this researcher named Eleftheria Rumili,
Okay.
who's created this strong, recyclable bioplastic just by pressing powdered algae.
Powdered algae.
Yep, under high temperature.
Wow. And is this algae plastic, like, as strong as conventional plastics?
You might be surprised. It's strong enough for a lot of applications.
Yeah.
And the best part is it biodegrades just like a banana peel.
Wait, so you're saying I could throw my takeout container in my compost bin
That's exactly.
and it would just disappear?
That's the idea.
That's amazing.
It's a game changer.
Okay. And then the article also mentions a researcher named David Kaplan who's doing some really interesting work with silk.
He is. He's amazing.
So molding silk pellets and even whole cocoons into usable materials, that also sounds,
It's very futuristic.
yeah, like very sci-fi.
It is. It's pushing boundaries for sure.
Okay. So silk itself has all these amazing properties, right?
It does, yeah.
It's strong, it's lightweight,
Right.
it's biocompatible, which means it can interact safely with the human body.
Exactly.
And of course, it's biodegradable.
It is.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me of this story about my great-grandmother. She had surgery a long time ago,
Oh, wow.
and the doctor used silk thread for the stitches.
I didn't know that.
It's so wild to think that something so ancient is still relevant today.
It's fascinating how these things come full circle, right?
Right.
So, yeah, silk sutures have been used for, centuries in surgery.
Yeah.
And now Kaplan's taking those natural properties and expanding on their potential through, new processing techniques.
It's amazing.
It's really cool.
Okay, but it's not just sutures, right?
No, it goes way beyond.
What else can we do with this?
You can think about medical implants, scaffolds for tissue engineering. Silk could literally help the body heal.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we've established it's strong.
Yes.
It has this really long history in medicine.
Yep.
And then the article also mentions that it has this potential for creating tunable materials.
Yes.
What do they mean by tunable?
Well, it means that we can actually fine-tune the properties of that silk material,
Okay.
depending on how we process it. So we can make it more rigid,
Mm-hmm.
we can make it more flexible,
Okay.
we can make it porous or denser.
Okay.
So imagine, like, you need a material that's both strong and flexible
Yeah.
for, like, a new type of biodegradable bandage.
Okay.
We could potentially engineer a silk-based material that fits those requirements perfectly.
So it's almost like building with nature's Legos.
Exactly.
You can snap together these different properties and get
Yeah.
whatever you need.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It is. It's very cool.
Okay, but let's be realistic. How does this stuff stack up against conventional plastics in
Yeah.
terms of cost? Isn't silk going to be way more expensive?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Right now, yes, bio-based materials are generally more expensive to produce,
Right.
but you have to think about it this way. I mean, we're still very much in the early stages of development. As research progresses, as we learn to produce these materials on a larger scale, the cost will come down.
Oh, okay. So it's like,
Think about those first flat-screen TVs.
Right.
I mean, they were incredibly expensive.
oh yeah, they were crazy.
But as technology improved and they became more common,
Right.
the prices dropped.
Yeah.
Same thing could happen with bio-based plastics. It's all about investing in the future.
I like that. Investing in the future. Okay. So we've got algae and silk showing some amazing potential here.
They are.
But the article also hints at some, like, bigger picture, systemic
Yeah.
challenges facing these bioplastics as a whole.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit more about those?
Well, cost is definitely one obstacle, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
But another hurdle is scalability.
Okay.
We need to figure out how to produce these materials on a massive scale to really meet global demand.
That's going to be tough.
It is. Then there's the issue of infrastructure.
Right.
We need to have the systems in place
Yeah.
to actually process and recycle these new materials efficiently.
So it's not just about the science. It's
Yeah.
about the whole system.
It is. It's about changing the entire system of how we make and use materials.
That's a tall order.
It is a tall order,
Uh-huh.
but it's also an amazing opportunity
Okay.
to really rethink our relationship with the environment.
Uh-huh.
It's about shifting from this linear take, make, dispose model
Right.
towards a circular economy
Mhm.
where materials are designed to be reused and repurposed.
Okay. And bio-based plastics could be a big part of that.
They could be a key part of making that happen.
All right. That is a huge shift in how we think about all this stuff.
It is. It's a big shift, but it's an exciting one, I think.
Yeah, I'm feeling inspired.
Good.
But I think it's time to zoom out even more and consider the implications for the future if this actually takes off.
Let's do it.
Like, what does that world look like?
Let's talk about it.
Okay, so we were just talking about algae plastic and this moldable silk. It all sounds so futuristic,
It does, doesn't it? But it's real science. It's happening right now.
and we're living in the future. It's wild.
It really is.
Let's go back to that algae plastic for a second. Eleftheria Rumeli's work.
Yeah.
She takes this powdered algae and hot presses it to create this
Right.
strong biodegradable plastic. And I was reading in the article that she experimented with all these different pressing times,
She did?
temperatures, pressures. Like, why was all that tweaking necessary?
Well, it's all about manipulating how those tiny little algae molecules bond together.
Oh,
Think of it like baking a cake.
okay.
You can adjust the time and the temperature and the ingredients to get different textures and flavors.
Right.
So by kind of tweaking that pressing process, Rumeli could actually control the strength and the flexibility, even the transparency of the final product.
So it's like she's creating this whole library of algae plastic recipes,
Exactly.
each one tuned for a specific purpose.
Precisely. And that's, one of the really cool advantages of working with these bio-based materials.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nature has given us this incredible toolbox of molecules and structures,
Yeah.
just waiting to be adapted for, our needs.
Okay, so help me visualize this. What are some real-world uses for this algae plastic? Like, what am I picturing?
Well, you could be picturing a lot of things,
Yeah.
Because of its strength and biodegradability. This material has enormous potential for packaging, disposable food containers, agricultural films that can break down in the soil.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. You're saying that instead of all this plastic piling up in landfills and polluting our oceans, it could just, decompose and
Right.
become part of the earth again.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
To create that circular system where, the waste becomes a valuable resource.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing. I love that vision.
It's a good one.
Okay, now my brain is spinning with possibilities. What about Kaplan's work with silk? Molding silk pellets and cocoons,
It's amazing. Silk itself has some really remarkable properties that make it so versatile. I mean, it's strong, lightweight, biocompatible, meaning it can safely interact with the human body.
Yeah.
And of course, it's biodegradable.
Biocompatible. That reminds me, I was talking to my great-grandmother the other day, and she was telling me about this surgery she had years and years ago.
Oh, wow.
And the doctor used silk thread for the stitches.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Isn't that wild? Like something so ancient
I know.
still being used in medicine today?
It's incredible. It is fascinating how things kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
Silk sutures have been used for centuries.
Yeah.
And now Kaplan is kind of taking those natural properties and expanding their potential even further.
I love that.
Yeah, through these new processing techniques.
Okay, so it's strong, long history in medicine. But then the article also mentioned that silk has this potential for tunable materials. What does that even mean?
That means we can actually fine-tune the properties of that silk material,
Okay.
depending on how we process it. So we can make it more rigid, or we can make it more flexible. We can make it more porous or denser. Imagine you need a material that is both strong and flexible for, let's say, a new type of biodegradable bandage.
Got it.
So we could potentially engineer a silk-based material that meets those needs perfectly.
So building with nature's Legos,
Yeah.
you can just snap together these different silk properties to get whatever you want.
It's true.
Okay, so that's really cool.
It is.
But let's be realistic, right? How does this stuff stack up against conventional plastics in terms of cost?
That's a fair question.
I mean, isn't silk going to be a lot more expensive?
Well, right now, yeah. Generally, bio-based materials are more expensive to produce.
Okay.
But remember, we're still in the early stages of all this.
Yeah.
As research progresses and we learn to produce these materials on a much larger scale,
Right.
costs will inevitably come down.
Okay. That makes sense. It's like when flat screen TVs first came out, they were crazy expensive.
It's a great analogy.
Right. But then as the technology got better and they became more widespread,
The prices drop.
Exactly. The same thing could happen with bio-based plastics. It's about investing in the future.
I like that. Investing in the future. Okay, so we've got algae, we've got silk, both showing this amazing potential.
Incredible potential.
But the article also hints at these, bigger picture challenges facing these bioplastics as a whole.
Yeah.
Not just specific materials, but the whole field. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, cost is definitely one obstacle. But then there's scalability. Figuring out how to produce these materials on a massive scale to meet global demand. That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it seems like a lot.
It is. And then there's the infrastructure piece. We need to have the right systems in place to process and recycle all these new materials.
So it's not enough to just, invent these new materials in the lab.
No, absolutely not.
Right, we have to figure out what to do with them once they're out in the world.
Exactly. We need to rethink the entire system.
That's a tall order. It is, but it's also an opportunity to really rethink our relationship with the environment. It's about moving away from that linear take, make, dispose model and embracing a circular economy where materials are designed to be reused and repurposed over and over again.
That's a pretty radical shift.
It is. It's a huge shift, but it's exciting.
I'm with you. I'm feeling pretty inspired by all this. Bio-based plastics seem like they could be a key part of making this happen.
I think so too. It's about aligning our materials with a more sustainable future.
Okay. So now that we've kind of explored all the amazing potential of these materials, I think it's time to zoom out even more and consider what happens if this stuff actually goes mainstream. What are the implications for the future?
Yeah, it's a crucial question. Let's talk about it.
So we've explored the science behind these new materials, and it's all very exciting. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. What happens if bio-based plastics really do become mainstream?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's not as simple as just swapping out all the conventional plastics for bio-based ones and calling it a day.
Right. It's not just a material swap. It's a much bigger change.
It is. It requires a whole new way of thinking about how we design products, how we produce them, how we use them.
Yeah. It's about that circular economy idea we talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. And bio-based plastics fit perfectly into that vision because they have this amazing ability to biodegrade and become compost. They can literally be returned to the earth.
So we're talking about designing products with that end of life in mind from the very beginning.
Exactly. Thinking about the entire life cycle of a product.
That's a huge shift in how we approach manufacturing and consumption.
It is. And, we have to be realistic. It's not going to happen overnight. There are those challenges we talked about. Cost, scalability, the need for new infrastructure.
Right. It's a big task.
It is. So what do we need to do to make this vision a reality?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
We need continued investment in research and development. We need to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these materials and making them even better and more cost-effective.
That makes sense.
We also need government policies that incentivize sustainability and make it easier for companies to adopt these new materials.
And let's not forget about us, the consumers.
Oh, absolutely. Consumer demand is incredibly powerful. The more we demand sustainable products, the faster companies will respond.
Right. Every time we choose a compostable container over a conventional plastic one, we're sending a message.
Exactly. And it all adds up. Remember, this is a story that's still being written. The field of bioplastics is constantly evolving. New discoveries and innovations are happening all the time.
That's so encouraging to hear. I'm definitely walking away from this deep dive feeling very hopeful.
Me too. Yeah. It's an exciting time to be following this field.
It really is. So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. Knowing what you now know about the incredible potential and the very real challenges, what do you think needs to happen for bio-based plastics to become the norm? What role can individuals, businesses, and governments play in making that happen? It's a big question, but I think it's one worth thinking about.
It is. And as we all grapple with that question, I just encourage everyone to stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, take action. Every step we take, no matter how small, can contribute to a more sustainable future.
I love that. I'm definitely feeling inspired to make some changes in my own life. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Until next time.